right. How are you guys doing? You're very quiet. Great. So thank you very much for the intro. So my name is, you've heard, Anthony Muyoro. So recently started this new role. So if you hear me mention my former company, please forgive me. But the topic of today and what I really want to discuss here would be, and I also serve as the president of ISACA Kenya chapter. I can see a few ISACA members in the house, so let me feel like a politician. I am not alone. Raise your hands up if you're an ISACA member. I can see Boniface, George. George, actually, I worked with him. This man taught me how to audit systems. Nice to see you, George. Great. Talking about zero trust, I really just want to mention a few aspects about it that I feel is also very important. And there's always this big misnomer that zero trust is like a solution, like a tech appliance that you plug and play and you get it. But the thing is this, it's really not that. And what ideally would be looking at here is what are the fundamental principles and what has triggered this approach and mindset shift. Because right now, as you know, security has pretty much evolved. You know, when I started in my field, I remember when we started doing IT security stuff, we were pretty much pushing antiviruses, and you'd feel very powerful, there with Kaspersky. And again, that was pretty much the signature base, what we knew as security solutions. But then, things have changed. Threats and threat actors have changed. Now they're becoming extremely sophisticated, like what Mbugu mentioned. Right now, we are actually not seeing the typical curious people who are just doing things just for the fun of it. You're dealing with syndicates, guys who are well-resourced, well-funded. And again, we always bashed that we like scaring people about cybersecurity. Let me tell you, it's not going to change. So we will scare you. And we will paint that picture that this is an increasing threat. So number one, what has triggered this shift? Digital transformation being one of them. The world has ideally changed. Everything now is digital. This as tech practitioners. Right now, at the very core agenda of any CEO or even CIO, CTO is how to enable the business digitally. And even from a government perspective, this is also true as well. In Kenya, we're talking about how many services? E-government services by the end of, is it this year? 5,000? Is it June? Yeah? All right. It's out there for debate. We want to launch, or rather lay more fiber cables in kilometers. We also want to set up digital hubs as well and hotspots. But then, of course, there's also the drive for increasing regulations. Yeah? Do we have a regulator in the house? Anyone from CBK, IRA, SASRA? Okay. So allow me then to say some things. When we talk about regulation, I think we say that, they're pretty much trying to slow things down, right? But I'm of the different view. And I've had actually the privilege, not really the privilege, but the opportunity of sitting with CIOs at 2 a.m. in the morning when they've been hacked and they've been breached and a lot of money has been lost, all right? Some of them top tier 1 banks, and they'll tell you money has been lost to the tune of maybe 100 million Kenya shillings. And that man's line is on the job. And at that point, a week before he had told the board, we have invested in the best-in-class solutions. We are 100% secure. We have the next generation firewalls and all these appliances that we pretty much are prepped by vendors to say, right? But then we have to also be very, very careful because as we know, security, ideally, we need to look at how to create a fabric, right? Having different tools not speaking to each other is really not going to give you the best outcome. Are we together? So what we need to also look at is how this hyper-connected IT ecosystem can speak to each other. You can get actionable data and you have solutions and tools that ideally serve the purpose. And this is where we also need to look at what has changed, the customers and even the people, end users pretty much, the employees. After COVID now everyone became digitally enabled. Working was from everywhere. So we're no longer working with the perimeters as we know it, right? And that is actually one of the key drivers to where we now need to focus on, where cyber has to be everywhere. not just within the boundaries of your internal organization. And then, of course, globalization. Many organizations want to partner or even connect to third parties, fourth parties, fifth parties. Remember, even your third parties also have third parties. So you're looking at this web of intricately connected connections that you also need to manage. Data is moving in and out of your organization. So again, the question is, how are you securing that data? And when it leaves your organization, is it secure? Do you have control? What do you need to do about it? And that also speaks to even the extended enterprise. And like I mentioned, your third party is going to have a third party. Data will move out. But then, do you have visibility? Do you understand the imperatives, particularly when you talk about regulation, like data protection? Now there's data sovereignty. You're pretty much also moving to cloud. And that is also my next point. Cloud adoption has become extremely, now I think it's the mainstream. Any organization that is not speaking cloud right now, I don't know what you guys are doing, because again, we argue and say that cloud is not now but also the future. You should not do well, but you should also do cloud, because there are obvious benefits to it, and I know speakers are going to, some of the speakers are going to talk more about it. And then of course, advanced cyber threats, and like we mentioned earlier, the interesting to note is that when we talk about cyber threats, and it's pretty much, it's a no-brainer. The biggest motivation here is normally financial gain, right? And anywhere people can make money, trust me, they'll become extremely creative and very, very innovative. I remember there's a time we were doing, it's like a research, and we realized there's this university somewhere along Juja Road, somewhere around Juja, and one of the students had created a very innovative malware. And at that point in time, that malware was actually charting among the top 10 malwares globally. So do we have talent? Yes, we do. Are they innovative? Yes, they are. Are they smart? Yes, they are. So if Anthony wants to pay that guy $50K a month, and that guy knows he can develop a malware that will make him $5 million the same month, what is he going to choose? So there's an ethical dilemma there, and that is where we need to also look at the demographic dividend. If these guys fall in the wrong side of cybersecurity, it's going to be dangerous to most of us. And then lastly, how do we create sustainable enterprises? Right now, there's really a push towards ESG and sustainability, right? And now we're coming up with frameworks where organizations have to track their carbon footprint. How many servers do you have? Is it sustainable to maintain and sustain that level of load from a power consumption and other factors combined? And that is some of the questions that now have also triggered a new approach to security, to cyber. And now we're talking about zero trust. So, without making any assumptions, what is zero trust security? And why is this important? Zero trust pretty much is a combination of many factors. And I'm going to talk about the key principles. Again, I'll reiterate. This is not a solution, guys. This is not a single appliance that you plug in and it does everything. It is not. But it's something that you build layer by layer, brick by brick, one solution to another, speaking to each other, getting data, and being able to create what we call a mesh or a security fabric. So number one, what are some of the supporting data points? I want you to keep me honest here. Some of the data that I have here were predicted in 2021. I want you to tell me whether this is true or whether this is false. First prediction that was made is that the total spending on public cloud would ideally increase by 21% by this year, 2023, to $598 billion. True or false? Has this increased? Yes? Do I hear a no? All right, fact number two. By 2024, nearly 60% of IT spending on application software will shift to cloud. Still on this cloud conversation. Is the shifting increasing or is it going down? Is it increasing? Exactly. The third one is on cloud. What are some of the software? The other prediction was that SaaS services would also increase by 19.4%. That was in 2021, and we're talking about by this year. So, has this increased? Yes, it has. So when we talk about this increase of cloud connectivity and cloud application, let's also look at the user. The prediction then was, I think we were just like a year into it, COVID had just started, that the remote workforce would ideally change. People would change how they connect. True or false? How many organizations here have gone back fully, working on-prem? Or how many here are still working hybrid? Come on, guys. Okay, who has gone fully? You've been told by order of management, you now have to be in the office at 8 a.m. in a tie, well, at your desk. None. Excellent. Then, there's one. Sir, bro, I'm so sorry. Let's talk. Anyway, so again, and those are some of the things we need to look at. Things have changed. The dynamics have changed. So we cannot use the same security principles that we were using 5, 6 years ago. We always say that in cybersecurity, it has a 5-year cycle. Every 5 years, things will change. Right now, what are we talking about as well? Cognitive, AI, and Michi I know he can dive deep into that topic because that is actually the changing trend right now. So how then can we enable cognitive security? But that's a topic for another day. So the risks here, as I've mentioned, reduce visibility. You really want to have visibility over your IT environment, and monitoring is extremely critical. What you cannot monitor, you cannot secure. And that is why we always talk about being able just to see what happens. And in fact, there's a statistic that I read that when you detect an attack, it reduces its impact by almost 50 to 60%. Because the impact, what we call also hack value. In penetration testing, there's what we call hack value. Hack value is if I perceive that if I'm able to penetrate this server, there's going to be data that I can monetize, either directly by getting that money or changing credit, debit, and all those things, or data that I can use even in dark web. Data, we always say, is oil, but data is extremely valuable. There's one of our clients that we normally do monitoring, and monitoring is we go to dark web and we try to see, is there any credit card that belongs to you that's going to appear there, right? So that essence of being able to action on a breach or anything that has happened in time then becomes extremely important. And then also there's shadow IT. And shadow IT, well, everyone has their own applications they're using. Marketing want to try out a new CRM. You have another team that is also doing something else. So you tend to lose control. You cannot really control these guys. Why? You don't want to be told as a security guy that you're slowing down the business. Yeah? And you know that's actually a very serious penalty. You can answer very hard questions, right? And then, of course, advanced threats, like I mentioned, these are always increasing. Bogo mentioned about Medusa. There is a host of so many things that have come over the last, remember what I said, where there's money to make, people extremely become very, very motivated and also very innovative as well. And manage devices. Now, there's some people here, your boss thinks you're in the office, right? You're probably responding to all the emails, probably on Teams, and no one cares. Why? You get the job done from anywhere. I remember there's a time I was working with a colleague of mine. So 6 months after COVID, we later realized Kumbe, she's working from an island, one of those places that were getting very highly discounted deals. But did we know? No. Why? She was very productive. Everything, very responsive, emails, Teams, when we are there, she's there. So no one knew about it. Yeah? Because now this is a new environment that ecosystem pretty much that you now need to deal with. That people are going to work from anywhere. So, back to this. Unmanaged devices, shared responsibility, cloud providers. You may not have full control. You have to trust them that they are actually doing what they're doing. So what is the solution here? As well as you also want to make sure you don't have data loss. Like I mentioned, evolution. Security has changed. Perimeter security in the 80s. This is how it looked like. But then this became less effective, particularly when we started having the instances of viruses, and that was that age where we had all this manner of things, right, that were happening. So signature-based security became, the go-to solution to security. But then this change became defense in depth. From a defense in depth is where now you have to put layers and layers of controls. So if you're an IT auditor, the first thing you'd want to check is, do you have a different layers of control? When this thing does not work, what else do you have? And then the other one was hybrid cyber. And the interesting thing is, when you talk about hybrid cyber, it actually created more breakout points, particularly when you talk about this SaaS environment that you'd have. And then, now came in zero trust, because now we are talking about always authenticating, always authorizing, always verifying that the identity it is the actual identity that has to be there. That if Anthony is dialing in from Kenya, and 2 seconds later, this guy is dialing in from Zambia, there's a problem there, right? Because it doesn't make any logical sense. And that is where this concept of embedding this kind of network, because the network perimeter has pretty much dissolved. We're not only dealing with application stacks and users within the confines of the organization, but these are now the people that would ideally be outside there. All right? So then, what is the big difference? So some of the challenges associated with this dissolving network perimeter, number one is enhancing the cybersecurity posture. You'd have different things that are plugging in. You'd have a hybrid of on-prem workloads and cloud workloads. So how then do you infuse a security model that ideally speaks to that? And then, of course, enabling access to sensitive enterprise data, as well as looking at the different users, workload, and devices everywhere. Remember what I said earlier. Cybersecurity right now is cyber everywhere. And not only are we talking about securing devices, securing workloads, securing the enterprise, it's also about making sure that it's resilient. What is resilience and what is the big difference? That you have infused and rather even designed the infrastructure to handle an impact or a cyber breach when it happens. Number one, can you detect real time? Do you have data that will tell you telltale signs? IOC, as we call them, indicators of compromise, that this has happened, so you need to action it very, very fast, right? So this is cyber everywhere. The example that I used, if Anthony is dialing in from Nairobi or is connecting from Nairobi, and the same device we are seeing it's trying to connect from London, South Africa, Iran, or elsewhere, tells us that there's a problem, right? So zero trust security ideally is also getting actionable data. Device type, what is the patch level of that device? Where is it dialing from? What is the security baseline? Like, is it a secure device? Can we trust that device? Are we sure this is Boniface that is trying to dial in? Yeah? And if it's not, what should we do about it? So, apologies for the very detailed slide, but this just indicates the two different paradigms. On the extreme, on the left, this is the legacy network infrastructure, or rather even the topology that you will have, right? But on the right is where, as you can see, cloud is there. You have a hybrid mix of the kind of people that are also going to be connecting there, and also the ephemeral connectivity. And what we mean by that is connections that also are very short term, because I can log in through my device on the same email address to the same corporate network, but I can also use my iPad, I can also use my laptop. Same person, different devices. Same profile in terms of user, but totally different devices. So are you able to also trust those devices? And that is where these principles come in. So, in my definition, zero trust pretty much is all about having these security principles infused into your infrastructure, or rather into your environment. So, why is it the new normal? You have employees, you have third parties, and allow me to simplify this as well. Also, these people will be accessing high value assets. So you've gotten a third party who's going to help you reach out or do creative marketing strategies. But then you've given them access to your customer list. What is your most critical asset as an organization? It's data, right? Data about what? Data about who? Because we always say it's data, but what data is critical here? If you're a bank, what data is critical to you? Okay, let me use this example. If I took your customer list as an organization and then I went to the competitor and gave it to them, how much would it be worth to them? And how much damage can it do to you? Let's drill down a bit. If at all we're saying each customer can give you potential revenue of maybe, for argument's sake, $100, yeah? And I have a customer base that pretty much is like 2,000 customers, clients. How much value would you put on that? So are you seeing that? And that is some of the considerations we have to make. Third parties, yes, they'll have access to these things. But then to what extent are we going to protect it? What are we having as security measures that when we terminate that contract, these people cannot access this anymore? And if they try, then we are dealing with a different problem altogether. They are breaching one of the clauses in that contract. So VPN, of course, ideally, it's commonly used, particularly when you talk about accessing the corporate infrastructure because you're tunneling. But one of the challenges that we saw when COVID happened, you had over 90% of your employees tunneling via VPN. Again, the thing was never designed to handle 90% load. It was designed for like the IT guys who are working on the weekend, right? George is out on Christmas and is being told, hey, kuna kazi. So he has to dial from that place. Yeah? And of course, there's also a number of users who would increase. Again, if you're an organization that also deals with agents and other third parties, that is something that you also have to consider. VDI, the desktop infrastructure, a thing of the past. I think right now it has performance issues because it would hamper productivity, very expensive to procure and to even set up, limited access and all that. And then of course, this pretty much environment, you'd have a breed of many things, like your private cloud provider, public cloud provider, your affiliates, your third parties, your remote employee would also be there. IoT devices, on average, we normally say, particularly this generation, on average everyone has like 3 connected devices to the internet, right? On average. Contractors that ideally you'd want them to support you, BYOD devices, subsidiaries, etc. So that is pretty much the norm. So, and as I conclude, we talk about principles. And in my own definition, zero trust is always about the key security principles that will ensure these key features are infused. The first one, zero trust network access. We do not just trust any devices. We have to verify. Can we trust that this is secure? Can we trust that the user is coming from a whitelisted place? Like if we know Michi is in Nairobi, but then we are seeing his profile trying to connect from China, we know it's Michi Huangyu, yeah? And it's not him. And do you have a feral connectivity, that it can be a short-term connection, that devices can change, but the profile remains the same? So we have that level of visibility. We have continuous authorization. That is a principle that you always authorize, verify that the patch level is secure. There's nothing as one secure, ever secure. It's a lie. The same device can ideally be infected in a fraction of seconds. So you need to also have that you interrogate that access to make sure if there's anything that is out of the norm, you're able to detect it. And then of course, built-in data protection. Yeah? Data protection, and we now have very different acts that are coming from different jurisdictions, different regulations. But like what constitutional lawyers would say, what is the spirit of the Constitution? We also need to understand what is the spirit of all these acts. Because in my own humble submission, all these acts are pretty much the same. Yeah? The differences would also be very subtle in terms of how it's been positioned, the wording, but the principles are the same. And now many, think tanks now say we have generally accepted principles. And I think there are actually 10. I've seen 8, I've seen 7. The maximum has been 10, right? So can we also be able to ensure that we are compliant to this? And that is where these tools ideally come. And I'm not bashing any vendor. What I'm saying, the tools will work effectively, but to the degree of how synchronous they will be to ensure that you have the outcome and the ultimate goal. So enhanced security ideally would be your outcome. Enhanced user experience is another outcome. Cost would be reduction. Sorry about the slides. I don't know if it's me or the screen, but I suspect it's mostly me. And then agility. Agility pretty much to also be flexible to expand your network infrastructure, right? So again, like I said in summary, it's all about zero trust principles that ideally would be you'd be able to infuse. And there are so many, I would not be able to talk through them, but ideally we have resources that I'm happy to share, and we have many approaches to the same. And what the conversations you would need to have even when you're approaching this, before you talk even about the tooling, is do we have a blueprint? And we know when you talk about a model and a framework, it's all about having a blueprint. So this is something that we've developed. It speaks about the blueprint so that it makes your journey and this implementation journey more effective, more synchronous, and by the end of the day, the outcome is the most important thing, that you'll be able to achieve the key things that I talk about, the principles, which are there, the features. Zero trust access, continuous authorization, ephemeral connectivity, as well as protection from a data protection perspective. Ladies and gentlemen, that's my time. Happy to take one or two burning questions, but I'm sure we'll be able to share this content with you. Thank you.